This is the hilltop village of Bussana Vecchia in Italy. It first grew up around the castle of one of the counts of Ventimiglia 1,000 years ago. In 1259, the village was bought by the Republic of Genova, and a succession of young artists and craftsmen added paintings, stuccos and friezes to the church here. But an earthquake in 1887 reduced much of Bussana to rubble, and the people all moved out. Abandoned as a ghost town, the collection of ruined houses was considered unsafe for human habitation by the Italian state. Its citizens built a new Bussana down the hill, and the old place stayed empty for the next 70 years. But it took a bohemian group of artists from all over the world to rebuild the old houses and establish their homes and studios there. Silvano Manco has lived and worked here for decades now. As well as being a working painter, Silvano is a musician, composer, and occasional landscape gardener. His paintings, like his music, reflect a feeling of freedom, space, light and shadow, which seems linked to the unique environment he works in. As one of the international community of artists established here in the 60s, Silvano has made his home and his life in Bussana Vecchia. But like his friend Marco Ossati, he's now faced with eviction by the Italian government.
In spite of whatever we might say about properties or possession or no properties, we've been doing and we've been working and we've been active with no certainties at all, because the state has been breathing on our necks for more than 25 years.
Some of the early artist residents meet to discuss their plight at the village tavern. The Englishman Colin Wilmot has been here since the early 60s. Like the others, he cleared the rubble from the streets by hand, selected a space and rebuilt it. But after an extended series of expensive court cases, it's now claimed that Bussana Vecchia is a national monument. So the people who made it their own will have to leave. Confusingly, some, like Dutch painter Peter van Wel, were never served with eviction orders. They've been granted ownership under the Usacapione law. He's lived here for more than 20 years unchallenged, so it's acknowledged as his property. It's a sort of squatter's rights statute. But the ruling in favor of some residents contradicts the case against the others. The village is either unsafe for human habitation, as the state still claims, or it's not. And granting ownership to some surely means it's not a national monument. The gelateria is a case in point. Danish owner Christina believes in doing things correctly. She filled in all the appropriate forms and always paid her taxes. She registered her purchase of the house from its original artist occupant. And the same court which granted her ownership rights ruled in favor of the state against Colin and the rest. She believes the others should have joined the system sooner. But there are some serious disagreements amongst the residents about the purpose and exploitation of Bussana Vecchia. Over the years, this picturesque little place with its winding cobbled streets and half-ruined appearance has attracted increasing numbers of tourists. While this may help some of the artists who make a living from their work, others believe it's debased their original ideals. The concept of property ownership was never one of the principles of their organization, the International Community of Artists. In fact, its written constitution spelt out who could live there and for what purpose. The idea was that Bussana Vecchia would provide a creative haven for serious artists and craftsmen to live in together. Now, many of the goods on sale to tourists here are little different from anywhere else, and the ideological guardians of history are disturbed.
If you use the land, you own the land. And therefore, if I use the land and the rule of this territory is to produce art and craft, if I use the land in this way, I am entitled to stay here. If I don't use the land in this way, I might as well go.
A few kilometers down the hill lies the resort town of Sanremo. It lays claim to being one of the jewels of the Italian Riviera. At the town hall offices of the mayor of Sanremo, Marco gets a surprisingly positive reception from the deputy mayor. Signor Berino recalls the days when the commune of Sanremo helped fund theatre, music and dance events in the hilltop village. He believes if the state were to hand control of Bussana Vecchia over to Sanremo, then the village could be made safe and its quixotic inhabitants permitted to stay. Marco teaches English right next door to the town hall. He's a good and passionate teacher who's traveled widely in Europe and America. But as an Italian, Marco feels his home is here. A relative newcomer, he built his house in Bussana Vecchia over 15 years ago. Another person with a long-term interest in the village is Patrizia. She calls her gallery Artitude. Not a painter herself, she thrives on running a small but efficient gallery business. Her walls are hung with paintings by artists who either work in the village now or once did so. If she were forced to leave, not only Patrizia, but a significant proportion of the serious artists here would go out of business. And many of the residents have nowhere else to go. Another artist who's put in 40 years here is Austrian Wolfer Weiser. With his wife Jana, a Czech silversmith, they've managed to adapt their crafts to the needs of the tourists. Wolfer took this picture in the 70s, but the tourists keep buying his tinted prints. The shop sells those smaller things the visitors easily afford. Colin Wilmot no longer lives by painting.
Oh, that's one that,
He's turned his talents to writing an historical novel. Colin wants to appeal to the European Court of Human Rights. He believes his almost 40 years here give him the right to stay in his home.
In a way, law as it is applied outside Bussana Vecchia has never been applied in Bussana Vecchia, and this allowed us to grow uninterrupted. So this is an experiment which still lasts and have been lasting for 40 years.
And these artists insist they don't inhabit a museum. Each house reflects the personality of its occupants, but nothing is fossilized in time. These spaces are people's homes, and the finer ideals of the 60s flow through to the young here. Marco and Giulia made this piece together, and they've built their own space in the world of the village. And these are the children of Bussana Vecchia. Several of them were born here, like Colin's 14-year-old son. They go to school down the hill. The school bus comes up to collect them. For illegal inhabitants of a ruined piece of history, they're very robustly present. And no one here believes that for the sake of a confusing set of legal technicalities, the life of this community should come to an end.